In my last experiment, I established that a 12mm gap was just wide enough for the mouse to get through. So I figured a Lego maze with passages 2 studs wide, that's 16mm, should be quite enough. I wasn't sure how well the mouse would do the corners, so the first 2 corners have a little bit of extra space, but the rest of the corners are really tight, and that actually did give the mouse a bit of trouble. And what's also interesting is that the passage is just too narrow for the mouse to even turn around in, except for the wider corners. It's funny to watch it struggle. This is just a wild outdoor mouse that voluntarily showed up in my shed for some free snacks in exchange for a little bit of work. Those last few corners are just really tight, and I wasn't really expecting the mouse to actually make it around them. And once the mouse had finished emptying out the maze, it came back and checked every corner of it just to make sure it got everything. So I bought some more Legos so I could make a bigger mouse maze, and I covered the bottom in here with paper because the dark brown mouse doesn't show up that well against the dark green. And I scattered some sunflower seeds throughout the maze to compel the mouse to explore it, plus a whole bunch in the furthest corner. Those 2 corners close to each other towards the back give the mouse a surprising amount of difficulty. I think I need to make that part a bit easier. Uh-oh, wrong species. A squirrel made it into that shed. But fortunately, it couldn't get into the maze. This is where the squirrel came in, so I'm adding some pieces of plywood to seal that up. And then it was time to get on to the next phase of my experiment. I built this rotating platform, and it spins the whole thing. And it's sturdy enough that I can spin this whole maze. The goal here is to see if the mouse gets disoriented if the maze that it's in is spinning. And here's that spinning maze set up in my shed with 2 cameras looking at it, just waiting for the mouse. So then I had the cameras running for all of January, waiting for the mouse to come back. But then the winter got really cold and the snow got really deep, and by the end of January there was still no sign of the mouse, and I couldn't even get into the shed anymore, so it just shut off the power. But then by the start of April, the snow had receded enough that I could actually get in there again, and I noticed there had been some sign of activity, so I turned the cameras on again. I thought I'd accidentally mouse-proofed that shed, but a big gray squirrel managed to get in there no problem. Fortunately, my apparatus was able to stand up to the squirrel's attempt at getting the seeds out. Next up, a red squirrel. Those move a lot faster than the gray ones. And I think they're a little more aggressive too. And here's me opening the door to check on the chaos in there. And look who's back! The mouse! It's too bad that by this point my experiment had been completely vandalized by the tree rats. But there's still some stuff in there and the mouse helped itself to it. But I didn't have my motor setup activated anymore, so the maze wasn't going to spin. But even with all the food gone, the squirrel wasn't done vandalizing my experiment yet. There's still paper to be scavenged to pad out a nest. So this gap back here, I guess this is where the squirrel and the mice have been coming in. And possibly over the winter, the area here was too blocked up so they couldn't get in. But what I need to do now is to make this small enough so only mice can get in. And if I repeat this experiment, I need to make the passages 3 studs wide, so it's more about the maze, less about squeezing, and I'll use a bigger base plate. And for spinning it, I'll probably use this wooden rotating platform which I built for my infrared heater. But in the time since I started filming this video, most videos have been doing much less well on YouTube, so repeating this experiment is not a high priority at the moment.